Bing, bang, boom. We got another episode of the Optimal Health Show. In this week's podcast, I got my real good friend, Dr. Isaiah Hankel. He has a PhD in anatomy and cell biology. He is a scientist, author, and entrepreneur. As well, he's a kick-ass coach. Now, the reason I got Isaiah on the show today is because we connected about less than a year ago at a conference called Mastermind Talks. And since then, we've been talking about hormones and simple steps that you can take on a day-to-day basis in order to optimize your hormones. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy today's amazing episode with Dr. Isaiah Hankel. Hey, Optimal Nation. Welcome to another episode of the Optimal Health Show. In this week's podcast, I got the one and the only Isaiah Hankel, PhD. He knows his stuff. And Isaiah's here today to talk about everything hormones and how hormones control your body. And the information you'll learn today is going to blow your mind. Isaiah, you with us?
Yes, I am. Hey, Ameer, thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for coming on the show. I've been meaning to get you on the show for a while right now because you and I, we clicked off. We met, I think it was last year at a conference here in Toronto. And since then, we've been having email correspondence talking, and the information you have is absolutely fascinating. And that's why I got you on the podcast today, because I want you to share your knowledge through years of research to benefit our audience. So basically, we're going to be talking about hormones and how they function in your body and certain simple stuff that you can do on a day-to-day basis that you can benefit yourself in optimizing your hormones. So why don't we just jump right into it right now? And Isaiah, can you please tell us exactly why are hormones important in the first place?
Yeah, keeping your hormones balanced is the only way to basically make sure that everything from the way that you're processing foods to your energy levels runs smoothly in your body. So when your hormones get out of whack, it can cause anything from heart disease to depression. So keeping your hormones at a balanced level, and they're going to be a little bit different for men and women, is important. And a lot of it comes down to diet. And I know you've hit on this a lot on both your website and your previous podcasts. So that's something I thought we could talk about first, is basically what kind of things you should be avoiding and what kind of things you should be eating to keep your hormones balanced.
See, I like though you said avoid, and I find it quite funny in the whole health world, either if it's alternative or not. People are always looking to add stuff into their life when you should actually pause for a second and be like, wait a second, why am I sick in the first place? Obviously, you've been doing something that's your end result is becoming sick. So it's not about adding. It's always about subtracting. It's like an artist. The artist always says, forget about adding. Is how can I subtract stuff to make it the most simplistic and beautiful, right?
Yes.
So let's just jump right into it. And Isaiah, tell us, what are these certain foods or lifestyle stuff that we have to avoid in order to optimize our hormones?
Yeah, I love what you just said about simplifying and really deconstructing it, because people want to complicate stuff and tell you need to add more and more and make things very complex. The simplest thing that I do, and when I coach people, I tell them, forget about trying to do the perfect diet in the beginning. Just do one thing for me. Really eliminate grains and really reduce your carbs. Try to get your carbohydrate intake down to about 100, maybe 150 grams tops during the day. And this simple thing will really help keep your hormones balanced, because carbohydrates, right? You overeat carbs, it'll jack up your insulin levels. You become more insulin resistant, so your pancreas produces more and more of this. And this acts to imbalance your hormones by jacking up your cortisol, which, again, you talked a lot about and can wreak havoc in your entire body. It can do things like raise your blood pressure, raise your blood sugar, which then again raises more insulin. So it kind of causes this devastating cycle. And carbohydrates have also been shown to increase the iconicides in your body. They're a group of hormones that really, really jack up the inflammation response in your body. So some of these are pro-inflammatory. Those are the bad ones. Some are anti-inflammatory. And the ones we're concerned about are those pro-inflammatory ones, those omega-6 long-chain fatty acids like arachidonic acid, which breaks down into prostaglandins and leukotrienes. And again, I know you talked about those. But carbs in general, if you're eating 3, 5, 1,000 grams of carbohydrates a day, it's really going to imbalance your hormone levels. It's going to cause a lot of these problems, again, by increasing your insulin, increasing your cortisol, and increasing these pro-inflammatory iconicides.
Yeah, totally. And I agree 100%. I always tell my clients and...
Icosanoids.
Icosanoids, that's right. I always tell my clients around the world that... the amount of carbs, even though they're in quote unquote healthy carbs, it can be if you're eating, your tubers, it's just the sheer amount that we're eating these days. It's not at natural levels. Even if you're looking at, like, say, hunter and gatherer cultures around the world and looking at the amounts they were eating in comparison to what we're eating, it's quite unbalanced. And you're right, overexpression of insulin within the pancreas is causing insulin resistance. So simple stuff as like just decreasing the amounts of carbs, and as you mentioned, staying away from the grains, because we've seen in studies and through epidemiological evidence that consumption of grains is not the greatest health choice. So those are fabulous tips. So anything else that people should really stay away from to optimize their hormones?
Yeah, I mean, carbohydrates is the big one, and I could try to get people to focus on that because that can be really hard. If they can do that and they hit that check mark, then I'll tell them to start staying away from dairy. And you've hit on this a lot. There's lactose, and certain things can kind of throw your hormones out of whack. And if they can do those two things, then we can start getting into things that we need to add back into the diet to kind of repair some of the damage that's happened. And these are things we can talk about, like fish oil, vitamin D3, iodine. As far as getting your hormones back in balance, there are some things that you can add after you subtract the bad things.
Definitely. Let's just jump back for a second for the whole grains aspect is, on the whole side of just raising your insulin, what are these grains, these quote unquote, these modern day grains, these transmutagenic grains really doing in our bodies besides, stimulating sononoids and etc. So beyond that, I've also seen in studies in my practice that it's actually causing, for example, IBS and Crohn's in a lot of people.
Yes. And I think there was an article that came out, maybe you remember it. It put it really well. It said, keeping the poo out of your blood.
Yeah.
Because basically can cause leaky gut, and it can scar your intestines in a way where the stuff that you're eating is going to contaminate your blood. It's kind of hard to imagine, but just these grains, like we're not made to process grains, and so it can cause a deficiency in your ability to uptake certain nutrients, for example. And so I think avoiding grains in general is important for that, but it's also important because it can raise your insulin levels for a long period of time. Whereas if you have a piece of fruit, it's going to spike your insulin, but if you have a whole pizza, your insulin level can be raised. Well, for a bagel, for example, I read a study where your insulin levels can be heightened for 6 to 8 hours after eating that bagel.
Yeah, if you look at the actual amylopectin, so certain the protein compositions within the bagel or the wheat, it's like, even like if you're comparing it between the quality that we're eating now and what, let's say, our grandparents ate, is like 400 times more.
Oh yeah, exactly. And there are some good alternatives out there. I mean, there are some of the breads that you have to keep in the freezer that are sprouted and stuff, but still, I think overall the first step is really just get your body off of that kind of insulin high it's been riding on for the last however many years, and kind of restabilize your hormones and your threshold for insulin output by your pancreas.
100%, man. Can you imagine now if, like, I deal with a lot of type 2 diabetes and insulin-resistant clients of mine, and just simple stuff as, like, switching a sleep system around and sleep cycle. And this one major step is removing the grains. Honest to God, within like 60 to like 90 days, their insulin resistance almost just disappears because they're not, activating insulin receptors no more. They're not feeding their body with this like so-called, I call it hypoglycemic roller coaster ride with sugar up, sugar down, and your body's like, holy shit, please stop doing that to me, right?
Well, exactly. And it affects other hormones too. I mean, we haven't even touched on estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, and having high levels of inflammation in your body caused by eating crap like carbohydrates and grains can throw these things out of whack, and those can have really devastating effects too. So it's a whole collection: insulin, cortisol, icosanoids. So all these, and I think for women especially, if you kind of start messing with your balance of estrogen and progesterone, it can really fluctuate your moods from high levels of anxiety to really low moods like depression. So I think keeping in mind that just something simple as eating too many carbohydrates can throw your entire hormone system out of balance can kind of give you that edge to say, you know what, no, I'm not going to put this bagel
It's crazy, but people need to understand, like, for example, like cholesterol, like all your hormones are generated from cholesterol, and then from cholesterol it becomes pregnenolone, like you're like pregnant, your master hormone, right? But if you're eating, say, like set grains or these inflammatory foods, it's going to stimulate certain immunoglobulins in your gut, such as IgA and IgM. But guess what? That also increases your stress response hormone, cortisol. At the same time, when you have increase in cortisol, that cortisol is going to cleave and divert your pregnenolone, just steals it. Basically, cortisol is just stealing your hormones, and then you're sitting there wondering and scratching your head, why on earth do I have low hormones? Maybe I need a hormone replacement therapy. But in reality, you need to recheck your dietary principles in the first place.
Yeah, always start with your diet. And I like what you brought up about the gut. I forget who said it, but it might have been Rob Wolf or somebody else. They said that if it's impossible to be healthy, 100% healthy, if your gut is always initiating an immune response. So if you're always putting crap in your stomach that your body is eliciting an immune response to, you're never going to be 100% healthy. And guess what? Like, your body is never going to be used to eating grains. I think they showed in over 80% of the population that these IgA derivatives were found in people in both their urine and excrement after eating grains. So these are not just people that have celiacs or have been defined with a disease. This is the majority of the population or is initiating this immune response to eating grains.
Yeah, it's crazy. And so that's a great first step that people need to really take into consideration to optimize your hormones, is dropping the grains. And you know, it's kind of hard to say, oh, I'm going to cut back carbs. So I always tell my clients, you know, drop the grains and substitute it with healthy, real foods, like such as fats, even tubers, like sweet potatoes, yams, yucca, like actual, real, quality, dense. Because that's another problem that people don't really think about, is nutrient density. They just think, I just eat food. Well, why are you eating food in the first place? What's the whole point of eating food? The point of eating food is to optimize your body, to give the most nutrition at one serving as much as possible. And if you look at like the nutritional context of like a piece of bread, it's nothing. It's a dead food. But then I compare the exact gram for gram context of, say, a baked potato, for example. That baked potato has 100 times more nutritional density than that piece of bread.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, you touched on a great point about comparing the two different lifestyles. And it can be addicting to eat grains and avoid fats. I mean, we've been conditioned for a long time to think fats are bad, grains are good. So I know that, I mean, it wasn't until only about 4 or 5 years ago that I really got off kind of the carb train and started doing more of this high-fat paleo diet, kind of primal lifestyle. And it was hard for me. Like, I felt like I was rehabilitating myself. I was like, wait, so am I supposed to eat whole eggs and bacon? I feel like terrified to go to a steak, whatever. Because I was like doing I kind of came to a health crisis. I was doing non-fat everything. And when I do something, I do a completely full bore. I mean, I was down to about 20 grams of fat a day. And then I got my first lipid profile done, and my HDL levels were at about 21. Which is about a third of what they should be. Yeah. And that's when I realized something's going on. So I eliminated the grains and started having the fats. And you can try to use that to encourage people, like, you know what, you're going to have to give up maybe that bagel, that piece of pizza, but you can replace it with like this nice fatty steak or some whole eggs, you know, avocados, these things that taste really good and that you haven't allowed yourself to have for a long time.
I can attest to that. When I started my health journey about 5 years ago, and I'm an autoimmune person, when I ditched the grains and adopted a very cyclic ketogenic type of diet, my body transformed. I mean, I'm walking around all year round in the single digits for my body fat, and I eat copious amounts of fat and copious amounts of healthy meats, healthy vegetables, and whole eggs. You better believe it, none of that dividing of the eggs. Right? Yeah, right. Nature knows, but people don't understand. Like, there's, you know, you got vitamin A and vitamin D that without the yolk and the whites being together, they don't actually synthesize properly and get in a bioavailable. So people, it's a psychological thing because we've been adapted and been marketed to and manipulated through transgenerational experiences from our parents and our grandparents here in the West that, oh, bacon's, you know, bad, and margarine's healthy, and butter's the evil, and then you'll eat copious amounts of this, you know, agricultural dairy, you know, this commercial dairy, because you're gonna have to have calcium, because calcium solves everything. You know what I mean? Like, it's freaking crazy, man. And if you look at like real cultures, I mean, before this whole advent of this like modern day industrial marketing, if you look at what they ate, man, real food, like real, authentic, cooked food and didn't have, like, I even talked to my mom. I remember I was talking to her like 6-7 months ago, and I was actually kind of like investigating, her aspect about health, because honestly, she was talking to me, she's like, Ameer, I don't remember anybody having type 2 diabetes. I don't remember anyone even having pimples. I don't remember even this cancer stuff when I was growing up. And she's in her young late 50s, right? Just like young late 50s. Now all of a sudden we're having an epidemic of like cancer. They're predicting 1 in 3 are going to have some form of cancer. 50% of the population are going to have some type of like metabolic problems, some high cholesterol. They're going to have some, high blood pressure, syndrome X type of deal. That's insanity.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. And I like that you bring up these past cultures, because some of those cultures still exist. There's Inuit societies who ancestors ate a diet of mostly blubber.
Yeah.
Right? and they're some of the healthiest out there. They don't have these problems. They don't have cancer. They don't even have like tooth decay. That's the crazy thing. Yeah. Some of the other cultures, I think there's one called the Maasai, who eat exclusively meat, blood, and milk. And they are complete, raw milk, and they're completely healthy, and they don't have any of the stuff that we're dealing with right now in Western society. So I think the proof's out there. It's just not on the public mainstream radar yet, but it's getting there.
It's getting there. I think the tipping point, as Gladwell talks about, is getting here, and more people waking up. When you see franchises such as McDonald's kind of going the whole, quote unquote out organic route, then you see things are changing, and you see like big companies such as Costco are starting to do, organic, even though I have my own quarrels with the whole term organic.
Sure.
But there's still, I see a tipping point. I see the tide turning. And I think more and more people really need to look back in our history and just see how, as a human civilization, how do ancient cultures, and even ancient, like you said, modern day cultures such as the Maasai, which drink goat's blood and milk, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Yes. How are they surviving? Why don't they have all these issues? So we got to look at our mentors in the previous lives and currently to solve our answers. Now, that's the first thing. So grains are out of the picture. Modern day grains are obviously harmful to our earth. And you mentioned before we went back to the grains that the second thing is dairy.
Yeah, dairy. I'm kind of iffy on dairy, but I do think that having too much dairy and people can be very sensitive to things like lactose. And if you're going to go with dairy, you should definitely go the raw organic route for sure. I mean, that would be the second thing to avoid. If you can get people off carbs and then off dairy, as far as inflammation goes, you can see pretty drastic results.
Yeah, let's just make a little divide over here and educate everybody listening right now for a second that there is a huge, absolutely huge difference when it comes to commercial dairy and raw unpasteurized dairy. Because commercial dairy is coming from sick cows who are trapped in this horrific, absolutely horrific factory. They're injected antibiotics. They're fed the corn, the soy, all this garbage food that we shouldn't be eating. And on top of that, whatever beneficial bacteria may be left from the cow, they end up, pasteurizing it through high heat. And to top it off, you got to put the cherry on the top. They add preservatives because they need that milk to last at least, say, 3 weeks on the shelf because they got to make $1. But when you look at raw milk that comes from, pasture cows in the sun, vitamin D, eating grass, no antibiotics, no chemicals, right from the cow, there's your raw milk. There's a huge difference. But I'm glad that you mentioned only I personally see it in my practice as well and through the literature that only a small percentage have the epigenetic expression to actually assimilate raw milk. And it's quite funny because when you look at, say, ancestral cultures, a lot of cultures per se didn't drink milk right away because they need that milk to last and need to exponentially benefit the whole tribe around them. So what they did with the milk is instead they'll make it into kefir or cheese. So a lot of people who do have these allergies gets eliminated because of the fermentation process. So now you have cheese is much more beneficial. You don't react to it and you can feed more people with cheese than you can actually do with raw milk.
Yeah, and I do promote eating cheese over milk. I think if you can just get away from drinking milk, if you can find good sources of raw whole milk near you, and like you said, there's a time limit. Doesn't last as long, and you have to worry about bad bacteria building up to. But the cheese is a great way to go because that fermentation process has been shown to eliminate a lot of the allergies. It does for me in particular too. So I think that's the first step. Is just eliminating. If you can eliminate those two things, then you can start to kind of correct some of these imbalances that have probably plagued you for a long time. And that might require adding in some good things. And I think there is some value of adding in things just simply, not too much, like fish oil and vitamin D3 and iodine to help, because again, we're talking about balancing hormones. I think those three are kind of the trifecta for really getting things back in order and reestablishing that foundation.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And let's go one by one through them and actually explain,
Great.
why should people actually add the first. Let's start off with fish oil. Why should people add fish oil within their diet?
Yeah, so to relate it to hormones first, fish oil, great. Fish oil, it actually raises your dopamine levels, which makes you feel good and is kind of like the motivation neurotransmitter. But these dopamine levels, once they're raised, it'll increase your testosterone levels too, which is good for both men and women to a certain extent. And fish oil has also been shown to reestablish normal estrogen levels in women. If a lot of inflammation is going on in your body, if you're having too many omega-6 fatty acids, and I'll get to that in a second, it can cause your estrogen levels to become incorrectly increased, like over-increased, because of a precursor called aromatase. So a lot of inflammation is going on in your body. Aromatase levels get jacked up. It's a precursor for estrogen. Your estrogen levels can get too high, and you can experience a high level of anxiety and a lot of different problems. So why is fish oil good? Because fish oil, they're omega-3 fatty acids, which are anti-inflammatory. And what they basically do is offset these omega-6 pro-inflammatory fatty acids. And the problem with diet today is that if you get meats that are grain-fed or corn-fed, for example, the ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 is way off, where I think it can be anywhere from 11 to 20 to 1, omega-6 to omega-3. But if you get grass-fed meats, that helps the equation a little bit, because then the ratio is back down to about 3 to 1, 3 omega-6 to 1 omega-3. But you still would need to kind of correct that with fish oil or by eating large amounts of whole fish like salmon and so forth, because you need a lot more, I think, than most people realize. Personally, I take about 2,000 milligrams of EPA and about 1,500 milligrams of DHA a day, just as an example. But it is powerful, especially for, again, keeping your testosterone and estrogen levels at healthy levels, at balanced levels.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And right now, you just hit it just a second ago. I'm even seeing ratios of 30 to 1 between 6 and 3. And that, that arachidonic acid pathway is brutal. People, they look at arachidonic acid as evil. Well, it's not evil. When it's overexpressed in that degree, it becomes quite harmful in your body. So controlling it with, EPA and DHA is a fantastic choice. Now, what's your take then on cod liver oil?
Cod liver oil, it's okay. I still prefer fish oil. I mean, I think it's within the literature, I see similar results so far. I don't know. What do you think?
It depends. It depends on the person. Like the thing with cod, it does have vitamin D and vitamin A. The problem is the processing of cod.
Yes.
Right. So you got to look at there's good companies out there that do cold processing. That's kind of fermented. So that's a really good way. That's how the ancient Romans used to do it. So people need to understand the end product isn't always what matters. It's how the end product gets there, right? What's the processing behind it? Now, I've used EPA and DHA alone as just single samples by themselves to actually help people who are overinflamed. And it does really, really well. But I think the dose is where the magic is, and each person has a specialized individual dose, and they can, go to their local doctors. And if you guys, do your magic, you guys can get your fatty acid metabolism checked and to figure out exactly levels that you need. So first is fish oil, and the second thing you were talking about is vitamin D, right?
Yeah, vitamin D3, and I'll tell you, taking this changed my life radically. I saw a difference immediately. I used to get sick, 4 or 5 times a year. And I had no idea why. And then I started reading up on vitamin D3 and checking it out. And at first when I was reading it, I was like, these guys are crazy. They're telling me to take 6,000 to 10,000 UIs a day.
Yeah.
And in most things, milk, whatever, where they try to lace it with vitamin D3, you might get maybe
400 IUs.
400. Yeah, exactly. So what I did was I went to my doctor and I got my levels checked, and they were just awful. They were in the teens, actually, which is really low. And I bet most people, especially in Canada or North America, for most of the year, have very low levels of vitamin D3, very low. Because even if it's a clear sunny day out, like right now in the fall, and you're outside, guess what? The way that the sun is hitting the earth, it's at an angle that's not getting that UVB, those UVB rays to hit your skin and produce that vitamin D3. So you need to supplement it. And so what I did was I got them checked, and then I started supplementing and slowly going up. And now I take 6,000 IUs a day, and I got it checked again, and I'm right at about 40. I mean, some people say optimally you can go up to 60 or 70, but just that small increase of 20 or 30 milligrams per deciliter of blood a day really, I stopped getting sick. I mean, I might feel a little under the weather around flu season, maybe once a year, but I mean, vitamin D3 is so crucial. It's a cofactor for T cell function, and it's a major one too. And not only that, but it also helps balance estrogen levels and progesterone levels in both. So it increases both. It's been shown to increase, I think, progesterone by 13% and estrogen by 21%. And a lot of women in particular have low levels of these hormones, which, again, can cause depression and can lead to low energy, low mood overall. It's actually in mice been shown that low estrogen can cause obsessive compulsive disorder too, which is interesting.
Yeah, that's the thing with vitamin D. People don't understand that it literally controls 10% of your epigenetic sequencing and your immune system. You just mentioned T cells. So if you have like no T cell production, low T cell, your B cells are running around like crazy maniacs making antibodies for everything. And a lot of people who do have vitamin D deficiency, I usually see my practice and a tendency that they have autoimmune conditions. And I'm a walking example of it. I was low in vitamin D, when I started my journey in health. And when I started supplementing with emulsified vitamin D, I started off with 20,000 IUs at breakfast to kind of mimic a circadian rhythm. I'm at right now 6,000. We're coming with the winter solstice, but I feel like $1 million difference. Is like you said, Isaiah, it's one of these supplements that actually you truly feel a difference. And when you go off of it, there is a difference. It's quite funny though, because if you look at like Arizona, United States is actually one of the sunniest places in the States, but however, they actually have one of the lowest levels of vitamin D. So not necessarily if you do live in a hot climate doesn't mean you have vitamin D. What matters is, are you getting your ass outside to actually soak in the rays?
Well, yeah. Are you getting outside? And you might think, oh, I'm pretty close. I'm in the south. I'm south of the United States. But guess what? That you're not on the equator. Okay, there's still a big difference. And I think for men, it's important to point out that vitamin D3 also increases testosterone and sperm count. So if you're getting older and your libido is going down, take some vitamin D3. It'll help.
I agree 100%. So what types of form of vitamin D you like to take?
Yeah, so vitamin D3, that's obviously critical, and I do the gel tabs is what I think is the best. And based on the research that I've done, it's much better to get it in that gel form than tablets, for example, because your body processes it better and more of it will get into your system and not get excreted out.
Cool. Yeah.
But I don't know. Do you try any of the liquid ones?
I do emulsified. I have mine in a phospholipid to bypass the GI tract. So if you're sick in the GI tract and if you're taking other D, the absorption rate is small. So if you have it like in a micelli phospholipid form, you increase the bioavailability towards your cell membrane, which is a lipid bilayer, right? So there's a couple of companies out there that come in emulsified forms, and there's different variants. You can make your own emulsified and not actually making it, but if you have like say regular vitamin D, I always recommend it that you take it in the morning with a fatty meal. So if you want, right? Yes. So it's huge difference. And fish oil
too. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Didn't mean to cut you off, but yeah, that's a great point. Thanks for saying that.
Yeah, cool. So now we got fish oil, we got vitamin D, and the third thing you were talking about is
iodine. It's funny because this is especially for people that are going to be eliminating carbohydrates from their diet. They're not going to be getting a lot of iodine. And unless you're using a ton of iodized salt on your food, which nobody does anymore because we've been told salt is bad for us, and it is, but taking a kelp tablet, about 225 mcgs a day, I go ahead and take it in the morning. It's critical for proper thyroid function and really the production of thyroid hormones, both T4 and T3. And these are important for regulating metabolism. Low iodine levels equal low thyroid hormone levels. Your thyroid can get bigger as a result, and as a result of that, your fertility and sex drive can go down, and your likelihood of getting an autoimmune disease can go up.
Yeah, I consider iodine one of my top 5 supplements, specifically now with our environment and the radiation. And you're right, when you kind of switch over to, say, kind of low carbish or like paleo-esque type of template, most people become iodine deficient. So taking, say, the kelp tablets or even seaweed, like what I do is like put seaweed in my broth, and sometimes Lugel's iodine with the potassium is a great combination. But yeah, iodine's huge. Like, I mean, absolutely huge. And what's the doctor's name? There's a doctor who's really famous about iodine. He does lectures and seminars around the world. Dr. Brownstein, I think his name is.
Brownstein, yeah.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. His work is fantastic. And he does some groundbreaking work in showing the connections with iodine deficiencies. Now, I want everyone to just pause for a second and don't think just one of these minerals or supplements are going to, like, you know, oh, that's the end all to my health problems. No.
Sure.
What Isaiah and I are talking about today is everything's a piece of the puzzle, right? So it's like a jigsaw puzzle. Iodine goes there, vitamin D goes there, my diet goes here, sleep goes there, you know, relaxation goes there. So eventually, when you put all the pieces together, you got a full you, right? So
yeah. The overall goal is, like you said, don't forget about the whole point here, which is to get the rest of the good nutrients in your body as well. Mm-hmm. You can't just take 2 or 3 things and think, oh, I've completed my entire nutritional profile. No, this is just to help get those hormones back in a state where your body can process things normally and help you run smoothly.
Yeah, 100%. And that's the thing, though, going back to the whole thyroid thing just for a second. And it's such an epidemic. I have literally like 70% of my clients are women that come to me with some form of thyroid. It can be, Hashimoto's, it can be hyperthyroid, it can be an autoimmune thyroid problem. But when I do the blood work and when I see from functional testing and I see that, I say majority, not all of them, but the majority of them have deficiency in iodine. So something so simple as, like you mentioned, taking the kelp tablets or somehow maybe taking Lugel's form of iodine does absolutely tremendous beneficial effects towards your body.
Yes, absolutely.
Cool.
Absolutely.
Cool. So what's next? What next can people do to optimize their hormones now besides? So we got eliminated dairy, we got grains out of there, and now we're taking these 3 awesome super supplements.
Yeah, so that would be the building block, and I would really go in that order of eliminating the bad players, carbohydrates, processed dairy, and then adding some of these things back in, and then really you can pick almost any nutrient that your body needs, and in some way it is crucial to keeping your hormones balanced. I don't care if it's vitamin A or vitamin K, whatever it is. So the point is that you need to really eat that kind of diet full of those nutrients. And you brought this up a lot already, Ameer. I mean, getting the greens inside of you that you need to getting the grass-fed, free-range, or organic meats and foods in you to help increase levels of the minerals you need, right? Iron and all the vitamins and stuff. So I think it's an important point to make that any one of these alone is not going to do it. You have to eat an overall healthy, balanced, optimized diet to keep your hormone levels balanced properly, or else they're going to shift one way or another.
Yeah, well, it's not an overnight thing too. Like I really hate it when I hear this. Like it's like a pet peeve of mine. Is I'm going on this master cleanse, or I'm doing this this damn cleanse. What do you mean? I'm like, what cleanse? What are you talking about? You're gonna cleanse for like 2 weeks, so you're living a life of toxic living for 20 years, and you're gonna cleanse for 2 weeks and go back what you're doing originally? Are you what? Like, it makes no common sense. Well, Isaiah and I are talking about is your life is changing for the better. You will never look back. You'll look back at your old life and give it, one of those, the Italian signal, right? You'll never ever want to go back because your body's thanking you. Your body's like, oh my God, thank you, Ameer. Thank you, Isaiah. It's about time that you're feeding me the proper building blocks that I need to live, right? And Isaiah, you can attest to this. I can attest to this because honestly, like 5 years ago when I went on my journey, it was crazy. Like my brain transformed, my body transformed, my view on life transformed. And can you not imagine now if everyone starts adopting this type of lifestyle? Wait a second. I don't have to imagine because people were doing this before, right? But can you imagine now if we retake our heritage, how we are given right to be healthy without having all the sickness? It's beautiful.
Yeah, I agree. And one thing just leads to another. So I would, again, I stress, because we covered a lot of stuff, starting with just one thing, cutting out carbs from your diet, cutting out grains. If you can cut out grains, check that box, and then cut out dairy. Once you check that box, kind of start adding some of the stuff back in. eating right, eating these whole natural foods, and then don't forget about other things too. I mean, even sleep can dramatically affect your hormone balance. So it's not just the things you're eating or not eating; it's also what you're doing the rest of the time too. Exercising, over-exercising, sleeping, not sleeping. These things will wildly change, and in some cases, change your hormone levels or offset them even worse than eating bad foods if you don't get enough sleep, for example.
Amen to that, man. You know me. I'm the...
You're the sleep guy. I had to throw that in there.
Right. Everybody knows me. Get your sleep on, guys. Get your sleep on. Awesome. So if you had to summarize everything, Isaiah, what would be your number one optimal health tip that you can leave us with today?
Yeah, the number one tip would be get your carbohydrates down to 150 grams or lower. And that's going to have a drastic effect on the balancing of your hormones. And just remember, I mean, overall, that's the key link to make here, is that what you eat affects your hormones. We think hormones are just based on our moods or something we can't control. It's directly related to what you put in your body.
Yeah, amen. That's beautiful. So where can people reach you at?
People can reach me. You can find me. I have a website. It's just isaiahhankel.com. You can contact me there, or there's another website that I deal with people. If any of your listeners out there have advanced degrees, you can find me on cheekyscientist.com.
Yeah, it's a good website. I like it.
Thanks.
All right, Isaiah, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show and educating our audience about the importance of a whole foods diet and optimizing your hormones. Have an amazing day, brother.
Anytime. You too. Thanks, Ameer.
All right, cheers.